Welcome to this week's episode of Eye on the Tigers. Yes, Andy's Name Choice won, and our show is finally no longer just the Auburn Sports Preview. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by Andy Hewling, and our first topic of today is Auburn soccer. Soccer will kick off tonight against Mississippi State as the first sport on campus since mid-March. There's a lot riding on this game, not only because it's an SEC game, every game counts this season, but Mississippi State has a fairly strong team, and the Tigers are coming off of a heartbreaker season ending, and they're really looking to prove themselves. Andy, what do you expect out of tonight's game?
Well, obviously Auburn starts out with a really tough test against Mississippi State, who's been one of the more dominant teams in the SEC in years past. But I think Auburn has a really good team under Coach Hoppe, and Auburn has a really good home record as well, as the Tigers come in to home openers with a strong record, really, above 500 when they open up seasons at home. So I think Auburn has that riding for them. Obviously, the fans kind of being limited is about a 20% capacity, but it's only a select amount of students and players' families. But I think, with the limited numbers still, there'll be some support for the Tigers. And I think it'll be a great night of soccer, and it'll be really great to see Auburn athletics kick off the fall season.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about the limited fans, and having gone to several Auburn soccer games, the fans play a huge role. They're loud, they add a commotion, they distract the other team, and I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. But on top of that, earlier this week, Coach Hoppe just talked about how much is riding on this game and how it's heavy and magnified, not just because they are that first sport to be returning to campus, but also because of everything with COVID. And she talks about how her team has been doing a great job and they've really prioritized this. And even in the off season, it's shown that they've continued to put in that hard work, which is super impressive considering they didn't even know that they were going to be playing until several weeks ago. And they had 3 players named to SEC preseason watch list. And even though they got rid of some really talented players last year and lost them to graduation, I think that they're really going to come out strong this year, and I think they're going to put up some good fights. But on to football. The Auburn Tigers will have their final scrimmage of fall camp tomorrow. Andy, what are you expecting in tomorrow's scrimmage, considering they only have 1 week to prepare before the Wildcats come for the season opener?
Well, obviously Gus has been preaching just getting the players game ready, and that's been the biggest thing that they've been going through this week, is trying to get those trying to get the hits in, but at the same time, there's been the problems with trying to stay socially distanced and how they're dealing with that with all the COVID protocol that they're going through with the SEC. I mean, Gus said that they're testing 3 times a week. So they're going through a lot of safety protocols, but at the same time, they're still trying to get game ready. They've got, now 1 week left till they play Kentucky next Saturday here in Auburn. But the thing is are they going to be game ready? Are they going to be prepared? And I think a lot of teams are kind of going through that same thing. And really, it'll be interesting to see how the SEC plays out, because I know a lot of games I've been watching, either in the ACC or the Big 12 or even the NFL, have kind of looked like preseason games where teams are, not as exactly on form yet. They're not, making the right plays. Sometimes it's been really sloppy, a lot of turnovers. But I think, for Auburn, it's going to be how can they avoid that and how can they come out with a really good start to the season.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting season. Like you said, those other conference games, they do look a little sloppy just because preparations for this season have not looked anything close to what's traditional. And I think it'll be really interesting just to see. I mean, last week there were some more COVID scares. 2 players tested positive, leading to 10 players having to miss practices, 5 of which were starters. They're expected to be ready for Saturday's kickoff. But like you said, those increased tests, they're helping, but it's also, there's just so many more chances to get that positive test, which is worrisome because you need a full team, and especially because they're only playing SEC games, every game counts. And I know that earlier this week, Roger McCreary was talking to the media, and he was just talking about how important everything is and like how he personally has been improving himself during the COVID pandemic and the off season when they didn't know they were going to play. And so is DJ Williams, and he was able to practice with some professional athletes. But I think for the SEC, in Auburn especially, I think these players are going to play a little cleaner than maybe other conferences just because they have been clearly putting in that work off season, and I'm really excited to see how tomorrow plays out. But also on the topic of football, there have been new stadium policies and game day protocols released for this season. What are your thoughts on those? Do you think that they're going to help ensure that we get fans all season, or do you think that a lot of people are just not going to mind them?
Well, I really do like what the university came out with, some of the protocols that they're going to be doing screenings, they're going to be having people go in certain zones. I think that's a good idea that will help kind of, I guess, avoid large gatherings inside the stadium. I mean, obviously, it's kind of unavoidable in some areas, but like at least inside the stadium, you have people in their zones, and students are able to go either as groups in their own like households or like apartments, or they're able to go as single people in their single seats with chair backs. So I think the university is doing the right thing to kind of limit how much traffic and how many people are next to each other in the stadium. But like I said, obviously, there's some things that will still happen, like with concourses, you've got a lot of people moving in and out, but I still think as long as people are wearing masks and doing the right things, that this can all happen. It's just going to be a matter of the university like limiting and having those protocols, but I think they have that in place. So for the meantime, I think it's going to be just fine for people to come to Jordan-Hare Stadium. But I do like how they have handled this, and I think that they're doing their best to make sure that everyone is safe.
Yeah, they really are doing their best, and like you said, I think the masks are going to be the most important part. Watching some fans last weekend on TV, they weren't following those very closely, and I think that that's going to be key in order to keeping fans in the stands all season. But one of the biggest takeaways I got from these new policies is that per SEC rules, there's going to be no live animals on the field, which is very sad because we're not going to get that traditional eagle flight, which personally is one of my favorite traditions at an Auburn football game. So that's really sad. But I mean, also on top of everything, there's no tailgates. There's a ban on tailgates and RVs, but the university just isn't going to be able to stop people off campus from gathering before these games. So hopefully that doesn't affect things too much, but I do agree they are trying everything, and I think that these policies look pretty solid and like they're really going to help. For our final part of this show, we're going to talk about a few matchups in other conferences and in the NFL. So Andy, first matchup is Miami versus Louisville. Who do you have?
I have Miami. I thought they looked really good last week against UAB. I think they're coming into this game. Obviously, it's a ranked matchup, but really, I mean, you can't really tell because these teams haven't put in a full season yet. So I think Miami can catch Louisville on the break and beat them.
For me, I have to go with Louisville. It's 17 versus 18, Louisville being 18. Slight upset if they win. It's their first home game. They have a fast offense, so that's my pick. For our next matchup, we have South Florida versus Notre Dame.
I like Notre Dame in this game. I think the Irish are looking strong. They beat Duke last week. I think they'll get an easy win at home again.
I have to go with Notre Dame too. I think they have great pass offense and rush offense, and I think that that's really going to help them in the matchup. Next up is App State and Marshall.
I like Marshall in this pick. I watched them the other week against Central Michigan, and they tore them up in the offense. I think they'll catch App State with a fast one here and upset the 23rd ranked team in the country.
For me, I'm going to go with App State. I just think that they have a usually strong performance in the Sun Belt, and I think that they're going to continue that. For our final college football matchup, we have Central Florida versus Georgia Tech.
I like Georgia Tech here because they beat Florida State last week on the road, and they were picked last in their conference. But I think this Georgia Tech team has something special, and I think they're going to win a lot more games than the critics are saying.
I have to go with Georgia Tech too. Like you said, they really had a great game last weekend against FSU, beating them in their own stadium. It's Georgia Tech's first home game of the season. Their head coach is back for a second year, and he is really turning that team around, and I think that they're going to be riding high off last week's victory, so Tech it is for me too. Now on to the NFL. First up, Patriots versus Seahawks.
This is a really tough game, but I have to go with the Seahawks at home. Even without the fans in their stadium, I still think Russell Wilson is a playmaker and a dynamic force on that offense. Although the Patriots are coming off the high of winning against the Dolphins, I think Cam Newton will find it tough and they'll lose in a close one.
For me, I have to go with the Patriots. I do think Russell Wilson and the Seahawks, Pete Carroll, they're going to put up a good fight, but I was really impressed with the connections last weekend and the chemistry on the field, and not only with Cam Newton, but also with Julian Edelman being kind of the last man left standing after Gronk and Brady went to the Buccaneers. I think that he's really looking to prove something this season, so I'm going to stick with the Patriots. Next up, we have Saints and Raiders.
I like the Saints in this one. I think even though the Raiders are opening up their new stadium, first night at home in Allegiant Stadium, I think the Saints will get this one done. I think Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas all looked really good last week against the Buccaneers. I think they'll continue this week.
I have to go with the Saints too. I do think even though it's first game in the Raiders' new stadium, I think the Saints are going to come out victorious. Drew Brees looking good. They have Alvin Kamara. They really did bulldoze the Bucs last week, and I think that the Saints are going to walk out with the win on this one. Next up, Lions versus Packers.
I like the Packers here. Aaron Rodgers, nothing really to be said there. I know the Lions lost a close one to the Bears last week, but I think the Packers are just way better than them.
I agree. I'm going with the Packers on this one. I think, like you said, Aaron Rodgers, he has a great receiving core, and they usually have a fairly strong season, so that's who I'm going to pick. And our last matchup of the week is the Jaguars and the Titans.
I like the Titans in this one. I know the Jaguars played a really good game last week against the Colts, but I really like Derrick Henry and his running ability. He's just such a strong force on that offense. Carries the load for his team. I think he'll do it against the Jaguars.
For this one, it's a little tougher for me. I think I'm going to go with the Jaguars just because Gardner Minshew, everybody's kind of obsessed with him, and I really think that he's going to be looking to live up to that hype associated with his name, but I think this will be a close game and a good one to watch. That's all that we have time for today. For more sports content, head to our website at eagleeyeauburn.com. I'm Delaney Barrow, joined by Andy Hewling. War Eagle.